All right, so today we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and look at something that I think is super important.
Okay.
You know, when you're learning English, you can learn all the grammar.
Yeah.
You can learn all the vocabulary.
Right.
But if you can't express yourself, if you can't share your opinion, you're not really fluent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a good point. And actually, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, weren't we?
Yeah.
It's one thing to have the knowledge, but to actually put it into practice, to really connect with people,
Right.
you need to be able to express what you think.
Yeah, and you know, it doesn't matter what level you're at. I think everyone feels this, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like you might have this thought, you might even know the words, but then you think, oh, but what if I make a mistake? What if I don't say it right?
Yeah.
Or even like, what if people just disagree with me?
Yeah. It can be very intimidating, can't it?
Totally. And that's exactly what we want to help with today.
Yeah, exactly.
Giving you the tools and the confidence to just say what you think in English.
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well is, you know, when we learn a language, we're kind of putting ourselves out there a bit, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's kind of vulnerable.
Totally.
And so when it comes to expressing opinions, you're putting your thoughts out there, you're kind of, you're putting yourself on the line a little bit.
Right. Like people can judge your thoughts, not just your grammar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that people might feel a bit hesitant.
Totally.
But the thing is, there are things that we can learn from native speakers, right?
Yeah.
About how they express their opinions, how they agree, how they disagree.
Mm-hmm.
That can really help us to feel more comfortable and to get our point across.
Yeah. So today is kind of a practical toolkit for expressing your opinion in English.
Absolutely.
Agreeing, disagreeing, all of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the basics.
Okay.
How do we actually express an opinion in English?
Okay, well, I think a lot of people will start with I think, won't they?
Yeah.
Which is absolutely fine.
It's
correct.
Yeah, it's grammatically correct.
It is.
Yeah.
But if you use it all the time, it can sound a bit
repetitive,
yeah, and maybe a bit
basic,
yeah, a bit weak. So we can try and upgrade that a bit, can't we?
Okay. How do we do that?
Well, there are a few different phrases that we can use. So, for example, we could use, in my opinion.
Okay.
Which is a really clear way of saying, this is what I think.
Right, and that's kind of like introducing it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Or we could say, from my perspective.
Okay.
Which is kind of similar, but it also shows that you understand that other people might have a different perspective.
Right. It's more nuanced.
It is, yeah. And if you feel very strongly about something, you can use, I strongly believe that.
Okay.
Which shows that you're really convinced about what you're saying.
So that's when you really want to make a point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you could use, it seems to me that.
Okay.
Which suggests that you've kind of thought about it, you've considered the situation. Or, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Which is kind of like saying, this is my position on this topic.
Right.
So there are a few different options there.
So instead of saying, I think podcasts are a good way to learn English, I could say, in my opinion, learning English through podcasts offers a really immersive experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much better.
It sounds more confident, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like you've really thought about it.
Yeah. And I think also just like learning a few different phrases like that, it just makes your English sound more interesting.
It does, yeah.
More colorful.
It does.
So what about, okay, so you've stated your opinion.
Right.
How can you make it even stronger? How can you really back it up?
Okay. Well, I think a good way to make your opinion stronger is to kind of give them some weight, to really back them up with something.
How do we do that?
Well, we can use our own personal experience.
Okay.
So, for example, we could say something like, based on my experience, which immediately tells the listener that you're talking about something that you've actually been through yourself.
Right. It's not just some random thought.
Exactly. Yeah. Or I've noticed that.
Okay.
Which suggests that this is something that you've seen happen maybe several times.
Right. You've observed it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Or, for example, and then you can give a specific example.
Okay. So instead of saying flashcards are good for learning vocabulary,
All right.
I could say, based on my experience, using digital flashcards with spaced repetition has been incredibly effective for retaining new vocabulary.
That's great. Yeah.
Because I get reminded of the words just when I'm about to forget them.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I'm like connecting it to my personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we share our own experiences, it makes our opinions more relatable as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because people can kind of connect with that.
It's more convincing, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not just saying, this is what I think, you're saying, this is what I think. and this is why I think it, because this is what happened to me.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
So much more convincing.
Okay, so we've talked about expressing our opinion.
Yeah.
Now let's say we're in a conversation and we want to agree with someone.
Okay.
What are some ways that we can agree that sound natural and fluent?
Okay. Well, the simplest way is just to say, yes, of course.
Yeah.
But again, if we want to be a bit more expressive, we can use phrases like, absolutely,
Okay.
or that's so true.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, those are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're kind of like showing enthusiasm as well.
Right, like you're really on board with what they're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so those are like single word or like short phrases.
Yeah.
But what if we want to kind of build on that a little bit and kind of keep the conversation going?
Yeah. Well, in that case, we can use phrases like, that's a great point. And what I've also found is,
Okay.
so you're agreeing with them, but then you're adding your own experience or your own perspective.
Right. Or exactly. And if we consider, and then you can bring in another element to the conversation.
Okay.
Or yes. And it's interesting to note that.
Okay. So you're agreeing, but you're also like contributing something
Exactly. Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone says learning a new language opens up so many cultural opportunities, instead of just saying absolutely, I could say absolutely. And what I've also found is that understanding the language makes travel to those countries so much richer and more meaningful.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're completely agreeing with them, but you're also sharing your own personal experience,
Right.
which is great.
Okay, cool. So that's agreeing. What about disagreeing?
Okay, well, this can be a little bit trickier, can it?
Yeah, because you don't want to offend anyone.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be respectful,
Yeah.
but you also want to be able to express your own opinion.
Right.
So again, it's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So instead of saying something like, no, that's wrong,
Right. Which can sound...
which can sound really harsh, we can use softer phrases like, I see your point, but.
Okay.
So you're acknowledging their perspective, but then you're going to introduce your own different view.
Right.
Or, I understand where you're coming from, however,
Okay.
which is similar.
Mhm.
Or, that's an interesting idea, but I have a slightly different take on it.
Okay.
Or, while I appreciate your perspective, I tend to think
Okay, so all of these are ways to disagree without being like...
confrontational.
Yeah, rude.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So it's about kind of softening it a little bit
Yeah.
and being respectful.
So if someone says the best way to improve pronunciation is to focus on individual sounds, I could say, I see your point, but I tend to think that focusing on the rhythm and intonation of the language is even more crucial for sounding natural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
And I think what all of these examples have in common is like, you're not just shutting down the other person.
Yeah.
You're actually kind of like acknowledging what they're saying and then adding your own perspective.
Yeah. And you're keeping the conversation going as well, which is really important.
Cool. So we've covered expressing opinions, agreeing, disagreeing.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, I think the key now is to actually put all of this into practice, isn't it?
Okay. How do we do that?
Well, one thing that I would suggest is just kind of being more aware in your daily life of how people express their opinions, how they agree, how they disagree.
So like pay attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of listen to how native speakers do it.
Yeah.
And then you can start to try and use some of these phrases yourself,
Oh.
even if it's just in your head to start with.
So like when I'm reading something
Yeah.
or even just like thinking about something,
Exactly.
I can kind of practice in my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So for example, if you're reading an article and you agree with something, instead of just thinking, yeah, I agree with that,
Yeah.
try and think absolutely, or I couldn't agree more. Or if you disagree with something, try and think, I see their point, but, and then kind of formulate your argument in your head.
So just like make it a habit to use these phrases.
Exactly.
Even when I'm not speaking.
Yeah, because the more you practice, even if it's just internally, the more natural it will become when you do actually speak.
So it will become more automatic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
So it's really about building that confidence.
okay, so to wrap up, expressing your opinions confidently is such a crucial part of becoming fluent in English.
Absolutely.
We've looked at different phrases for making your opinion stronger, for agreeing and disagreeing politely, and basically just sounding more natural and more confident when you're speaking.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway is that it's all about practice.
Totally.
So try and use these phrases as much as you can.
Yeah.
Listen to how native speakers do it, and you'll find that it becomes much easier and much more natural over time.
And you'll find that people are more interested in what you have to say
Absolutely.
because you sound more confident.
Yeah.
All right, so one final thought for everyone listening.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we're living in this world now where AI is kind of becoming more and more present in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
What do you think about the role of AI in helping people learn English?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Or learn any language?
Yeah.
You know, do you think it can be helpful? Can it be harmful?
It's a big question, isn't it?
It is a big question.
I think it's got the potential to be both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a tool that can be used to help people learn,
Yeah.
but I think it's also important to be aware of the limitations
Totally.
and to make sure that it's used in a way that's beneficial.
And also like how it's changing the way we think about language learning in general.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like something to think about.
It is.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
But hopefully this has given you some food for thought and some new tools to use in your English conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.